they can listen to the video. Listen to the video. Mel,
So,
you embarrass me when you post what's on next week and the week after and the week after. You just line people up like you're supposed to be doing rather than us playing off the hook here. But
so I have 8:01. Shall we start this thing?
yeah, let's start this thing.
All right. Because we talked about this beforehand, you may know him as the host of this session. Some of us know him as the creator of Ping Pong Circulate, Chain Down the Line, and Ferris Wheel, former accredited caller coach and on the Caller Lab Board of Governors for 10 years. Let me introduce to you Don Beck.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you all.
I heard of him.
I did, but not until I was about 3 or 4 years old. We are going to talk about six-couple dancing for the rest of us. And I guess, why don't we get right into it? I'm going to switch over to my presentation screen. Share screen. Go to this. See if the keyboard command works this time. No, I'll go up to play. A slideshow. Oh, that's interesting.
And you have managed to freeze your screen.
Well, it's not frozen, it's here, but what it is done though is taken the Zoom things that cover up part of what I was going to read, and usually I try to, maybe I can do that. Switch into gallery mode so I can see more faces, or galley mode rather, but I can't see my cursor. Oh, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to do that and click that. Then open that so I can see some more of you, and then go back to, no matter how much you plan this ahead, you still end up being in a mess like I am here. All right.
It's my screen that's frozen.
Oh, let me know when you're ready, Mel. Anyway, six-couple dancing, and I like to think of this for the rest of us, because a few weeks ago, we had Clark Baker on talking about hexagons. And hexagons are a special form of dancing. Watch the tape and Clark will tell you all about it. But it adds an extra challenge to those people that are good dancers and want to go on from there. Anyway, today's presentation is by me on this date and all that stuff. Six-couple dancing. Most people that I know do it in rectangles. You've got four head couples and 2 side couples. Then there are things like hexagons that add challenge. And there are a bunch of other things too. I think Clark's going to be doing something on hashtag calling, and I'm not even putting that in here because I don't know about it, but I plan to tune in and watch. But today we're going to work on facing lines, and that, which happens to be my preference, and I'll try to explain why. So why facing lines? Well, there are advantages for the caller and for the dancer. For the caller, it's really easy to set up. You don't have to go out on the floor and push people around into a hexagon. You don't have to explain about 4 head couples and 2 side couples and say square up this way. We'll talk about how to do that very soon. Basically, there's almost nothing to teach the dancers. So you don't have to teach them any special rules. Hexagons have a lot of them. The main thing, and I say basically nothing, the only thing you have to do is say that on a grand right and left, you go 6 hands instead of 4. And this is your new home position. It's really easy to use to add to your repertoire if you're a module caller or if you're a mental image caller. For the dancers, nothing new to learn, which means you can just basically use it off the bat, and you don't have to waste time teaching, and they can just enjoy something that feels different, but it's not. It adds variety, so it'll feel different. It'll give them, you know, a kick out of it here and there. And it has the advantage that on occasion, you may be able to get dancers that are sitting out to join in with you. For me, it happens to be the first way that I learned. So that's my personal preference, because I didn't know about these other things when I came up. I think I came up with it myself. Maybe I got it from somebody else. Anyway, not a big deal. But I hope to show you here what the advantage of using facing lines is. So first of all, when to use it? It's a gimmick. Use it when you need something for variety. And one of the, oh, I already had that. One of the times that it pops into my mind to use it was when I notice I have just 3 squares, or just 6 squares, or an even number of 3, and they're lined up in rows and columns, and there are three squares across the front, and then another column of 3 and another of 3. The other time I use it is when I've only got 1 square left at the end of the evening, but there are 2 other couples, and they start walking out the door, and I said, wait a minute, you guys don't have to leave yet. We can get you into the dance too. And there's probably more often I use it there, and they're impressed that I'm, you know, catering to them so they can dance also. So the question is, how do I set it up? I said it was easy to set up. I didn't have to poke people here and what have you. Assuming I have 3 squares in the front row, I will say sides lead right in the circle to a line. And then I will have the center square divide in the middle, and 2 of the couples slide over to the couple on their left, and 2 of them slide over to the couple on their right. So then I have 2 sets of lines facing. I could have done it with heads lead right in the circle to a line, and have vertical lines instead of horizontal lines, or should I say columns instead of rows. But I don't. And even though I was an avid contra dancer and really enjoy it, I don't think contra dancing fits into our Western square dance program, and it's left a bad taste for a lot of dancers. And if I got them into vertical lines and into columns instead of rows, some of them would sort of have this negative thing right away. Oh God, we're going to do contras. So I like to have the rows across instead of up and down. Minor thing, but it makes sense to me. And also, what we're going to do not only works for 6 couples, but the exact same thing works for 4 couples or 8 couples. Let's say I had 9, 10, 11, 12 couples, and I have 3 rows of 3, and then I've got a normal square left over. I just have them also square up and sides lead right, and they've got a column of you know, a regular square, 4 dancers facing 4, but all the calls I'm going to do work for them also. Or if we had 2 full squares and they wanted to play the game, I have 2 of them get next to each other, and we'll do it with 8 couples. It all works the same. That's sort of one of the beauties of it. And again, the only difference is the timing for the promenade home. And maybe a couple other things, but not much. So what are we going to do with that? After we set this up, we have, I tried to put it in current terminology, partner lines. I used to think of it as zero lines, and before that I used to think of it as 1P, 2P, 3P lines. So on this diagram, you know, pardon me, but I'm stubborn. I don't use the squares and circles with noses. I use part of a square and part of a circle with arms. So think of these as arms. These are facing lines. And the number 1 couple is together. The squares are the boys, the curvy ones are the girls. Are there any questions at this point about looking at the diagram and what it means? This is where we would end up after a heads lead right, sides lead right, and circle to a line, and make the appropriate things. I will be showing the diagram of the different setups along the way, but we won't be moving them very much. I would love to be able to be doing this in Taminations, but it hasn't accommodated 6 couple stuff yet.
Hey, Don, I got a question.
Yes.
You said you had 3 squares across the front, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you did what?
I did sides lead right, circle to a line.
All right. So then you had, now you have
A whole bunch. And then I'll have the center. Then I'll have the center square divide and slide apart so that there's 2 sets of 6 couples on either side. The center couple.
So the center square splits down the middle, and 2 couples go one way, and 2 couples go the other.
Correct.
Okay. Now I'm with you.
The other thing I forgot to say is that I've got handouts for this talk that I made years ago. The examples are slightly different, what have you, but basically all the information is here. And Dan is going to make those available. I just sent them over to him. Dan is going to make the handouts available. So don't waste time trying to write down the examples and things like this too, John. It is reviewed in there. So for the sake of leaving enough time for discussion and such, we're going to go through some of this stuff rather quickly because you'll have it written down afterwards. But I just trying to get the basic principles part. But feel free to ask questions like you did. And some of them I might put you off till later, and some I might explain if I forgot something, like forgetting to tell you that there's going to be handouts so you have the information. Anyway, partner lines. Let's start with some get outs from a partner line to an Alaman left or right and left grand. The typical modular caller, I'm sure, has many. Somebody posted on one of the Facebook square dance groups very recently, what's your go-to get out from a partner line? And people have been adding stuff to that for 3 weeks now. I think they missed the main comment at the beginning that says, what's your go-to get out? They have all sorts of really cool ones, but I doubt it's their go-to get out. In fact, I put in a few that aren't my go-to get out, but typical from a partner line. And I'm not going to go through each of these one at a time because they're all in the handout or a few extras in the handout. Now, so I wish I had the pointer. Look at the third one down. Alaman left. You can do that if you had to, or the bottom one, grand right and left. You can do that from a partner line. Or one I don't have here, it's swing your partner and promenade, or all join hands and circle left. But what I used to think of, and I don't know what the going thing is on partner lines, is star through, square through, 3/4 to an Alaman left, the first one up there. And you know, some of the ones in that thing where left square through 4 hands, touch a quarter, boys run, or near the bottom, touch a quarter, ladies run to a right and left grand. I think these are common modules that people use, but any module that you have that will get them to a Alaman left or right and left grand from partner lines, you got that there for you right away. Let's move on. Let's convert partner lines to a partner box. Took me a while to figure out what that was. I used to think of this as an 8-chain 1 formation. Basically, if you pass through to your corner, do an 8-chain 1 to your corner. And here's a bunch of ways that you can convert your partner line to a partner box. And, right and left through, star through, right and left through, pass the ocean, ladies trade, recycle. You want to make the dancers work a little harder, spin the top, men run, wheel and deal. any way you want, but let's look at some partner box get outs. A whole bunch of them. We're not going to, actually the first two are interesting. An 8-chain one will work. You could call an 8-chain, or you could call it a 12-chain one if you wanted to, because it's not 8 people moving, it's 12 people moving. So in this case, it's not exactly the same for the couple of the 4 couple square in the back after you have 3 rows of 6 couples. Equivalent in a regular square, the equivalent to a pass through would be an 8-chain 1 or an 8-chain 5. In this case, if you only had 6 couple things, you could call an 8-chain 7 or an 8-chain 15 and go out for coffee. But they'd get you to an Allemande left. The basic one is pass through to an Allemande left. Another basic thing is right and left through, square through 3/4, or various things to a right and left grand, box and at, swing through, men trade, etc. They're all listed here. And they're on the handout also, so you don't have to bother writing any of these down. And the last thing on the bottom is if you wanted to convert back to the partner lines, because you were going to do some kind of a get out from there, you just do a star through and you're back to your partner lines. Moving on to a corner box, equivalent to a 0 box or an 8-chain through box 1/4. How can we convert from our original partner line to a corner box? And here's a bunch of standard ways you can do it. One I use a lot is touch a quarter, single file circulate one place, and the boys run. There are several others. Let's see. Yeah, the bottom one is, past the ocean, right and left through, past the ocean, spin chain through, and scoot back. And this ends you in a corner box plus step to a wave, but that's okay too. Again, they're simple ways, modules that'll convert partner lines to corner boxes. And there's a lot of stuff we do from corner boxes because we do that a lot from regular squares with heads square through and get started from there. So corner box get outs, Allemande left. Right and left through, pass to the center, center square through, 3. An overused one is swing through, boys run, Ferris wheel, centers pass through. I put the last one in just to make you thinking. It's a slide through, square through 3/4. This doesn't end in your corner box Allemande left. It's lines facing out, but it's very possible that dancers do it, and more often used in singing calls than not. Speaking of singing calls, somebody remind me at the end to talk about them because I forgot to put them in the formal presentation. If you want to play around in your corner box for a while and then come back to your partner lines, there's a bunch of normal ways of doing that. Spin chain through, end circulate, double centers, run, bend the line. I think that's a module that a lot of people have learned. I never did, but I know it works because I didn't have to. Flutter wheel and sweep a quarter, touch a quarter, coordinate, wheel and deal, and sweep a quarter. That'll get you from a corner box back to a partner line. Swing through, AC doocy, boys run, bend the line. By the way, in a lot of these examples or talks I give, I try to stick to mainstream. This has a number of plus calls in it. Enjoy the plus calls, or if you don't want to, just use the mainstream calls as you are. What's this? Oh, 0. This is where Zoom has a thing over my thing, and I can't tell what it is. Zeros and equivalents. I guess that's what we're doing. So if you're doing any call, if there are a bunch of zeros and equivalents that you know and use when you're a module caller that involve only 2 couple calls, two couples, right and left through and right and left back, what have you. Any of those will work with the 3 pairs of 2 couples as well as they do with the one with 2 pairs of 2 couples, or 4 pairs if you're doing 8. 4 couple calls that are zeros that work. The 2 that came to mind are 2 chicken plucker equivalents. If I do right and left through, if I do pass to the center, pass through, right and left through, pass to the center, pass through, right and left through, or pass through, trade by, right and left through, pass through, trade by, right and left through, you're back to where you started from. Here's a word of warning. Do not do dive through, pass through, right and left through. Dive through, pass to the center works nicely, or pass through, trade by with 6 couples. But if you try to call dive through, the outside pairs of couples know that the center arches and the other pass dives through, but the center 4 couples, who's going to arch and who's going to dive? You could have 2 people with arches staring at each other, or 2 people diving through and cracking heads. And so do not call dive through. There are limitations to this. 4 couple zeros from waves, spin chain through, women circulate and scoot back. It'll get you back to where you were as a 0 module. Spin chain the gears. Yes, it's plus. But once you get them moving, they get quite a kick out of this with 2 stars on either side and the whole thing. But they can do it without, and if they can do a normal spin chain the gears, they can do this without any real problems. Somebody tell me what that says. I can't read it because of the silly Zoom thing over. Additional thoughts. Got it.
Additional thoughts, yes.
Additional thoughts. There's something interesting. The technical zeros that use everybody, like spin chain the gears, work. But some true zeros don't work. Relay the deucey does not work. You end up with, I can't remember exactly, but the end 2 waves end up with 2 guys and 2 gals, and the center wave ends up with either 2 guys in the middle or 2 girls in the middle. But just don't use relay the deucey. It doesn't. So I guess you've got to work your checkers to be sure if you got some of those. But in general, technical zeros, if you know what they are, will work, and true zeros don't. Oh, there's stuff that you can do with 6 stuff that's not your typical stuff that you can play with if you're really pushing this, but I find it's not necessary. I mean, let's have, lines of 6 forward and back, pass through, do a 3x3 wheel and deal, double pass through, first 3 left, next 3 right. It zeroes out, but you don't need to get into that kind of stuff. And there's plenty of material to entertain your dancers with. It only goes so far. I remember at a Caller Lab session, 5, 6, 7 years ago, that I had his name on the tip of my tongue. He's been with us on occasion. Bob Elling has done some amazingly intricate stuff with 6 couple stuff, that he's had some memorized sequences that get you into weird setups and out again. Really interesting to watch and what have you, but doesn't follow the guidelines that I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to make it so that you, the module caller that has some modules you use already with 4 couples, it will work with 6. You don't have to learn anything new. And it's nothing new for the dancers. It's just variety. If you know mental image, all the rules we've learned there apply to ad lib calling in this too. And in my mental image classes, I spend 1 session showing basically what we've been doing, but how to do it with mental image. And not so much so that you can use 6 couple, but more so that you can see how the same rules you've learned apply with this kind of a setup, which is kind of cool. If you're a site caller and just want to call anything you want, you can have some real fun. I've tried it, like calling Relay the Doocy. But I tried to resolve and I really couldn't. I don't advise trying to resolve unless you want to go much further into what you already know. As I say, what we're trying to push here is 6 couples for the rest of it. So you don't have to learn new stuff. You can just add it when you need it. Need it for 1 extra pair of couples or variety, gimmick. As I said at the beginning, most people use the rectangle setup instead of the facing lines. Most of the stuff we've applied, talked about here works the same for that. I just prefer starting with the lines because it's easier to set up. I don't have to explain what I'm doing. I just get them there and say, here you are. One of the things that I should have mentioned earlier, that when you do it from lines, you know, I'll get them into that position and I'll say, everything's the same what you know, except this is home position. If I say promenade home, you come back to this spot. And I also will mention, I generally have a promenade after an Alaman left. Occasionally I'll throw in a right and left, and I'll say, if you do a right and left grand, you keep going till you get to the person you started it with, generally your original partner. I don't call right and left grand too often because it just goes on forever. But as you know, just part of the showmanship stuff, I'll say, you know, Alaman left your corner to a right and left grand, go hand over, hand over, hand over, hand over, and hand, and eventually get there and promenade home. It's use it once in a while just to show them they can do it. And again, if you have a 4 couple square in the back, it's going to be different from them, and the timing is always different on that. But as I say, if you do want to set up the rectangles and you have the head square through, now you're in your corner box and you can do all the 0 stuff we've talked about before and what have you. And as I've said frequently, remember, it's a gimmick. Have fun with it, but don't overdo it. I had one group, weekly or monthly group, that really liked it. And I said, well, we'll do one tip this, or maybe somebody suggested do that thing. And they really love it the first time. But if you do it 3 weeks in a row, they're pretty bored. There's nothing new or exciting there. I do what? If you have, you know, one club, a weekly club, and you do it once every month and a half, that's okay. Yeah, as I said at the very beginning, when do you do that? Well, if you only have a square and a half left, if you happen to have 3 rows of 3 squares, if all of a sudden it shows up, why, take advantage of it, but don't overdo it. And the one thing I didn't put in the slides, but I should have talked about, and I said you guys should remind me of, is singing calls. I very frequently actually do singing calls with 6 couple stuff. I will either do, so the normal singing call is break, figure, figure, break, figure, figure, break. And it's 7 times through. I will either do a break at the beginning where it's pretty much just circle left or stuff where you stay near your partner and don't go all the way around. And then the figure through 6 times to get them back to their original partner. Or depending on the song or my mood, I'll do 3 figures, a break in the very center, and then 3 figures at the end. And again, get them to your corner, swing them and promenade. Change your timing so they have enough room to promenade all the way home. And with that, I managed to keep it to half an hour. That's all I can think of in the basic presentation. I'm sure, no, I'm not sure, but I'm hoping Oh my God. Oh, all right. I can't say I can't see the cursor. How am I going to push stop sharing? But
I can unshare or stop share if
no,
you
I,
need
I
that.
just pushed the escape key. That did it for me. So thoughts, comments, questions, additions, subtractions, like why do I bother? Why do I have to learn modules? Dan, you want to tell them how to find the handout? The handout is a two-part thing. One is just a page of words that has explaining what, why, and how I set it up. And the other one is a number of here's get-ins and get-outs and conversions between the partner line, the partner box, the corner box, and that kind of stuff.
So I have added the handouts to the chat now. And for those of you watching along on video, I will both put the chat and in the comments and try to link the handouts separately as well. Yeah, big old thank you, because I have often fallen back on rectangles on those nights when I get 10 couples or how does that work? Yeah. And yeah, appreciate thinking about these things just in terms of lines and being able to use some of the technical zeros. That's kind of cool.
It is.
Hey, John, what's the limit on how many couples you can have in a line then? Is there, you had 3 couples in a line, because you do 7 or 8 in a line? I mean,
You mean you can
sounds
do
like,
you can have any even number of dancers dancing this. Let's say you've got a hall that's got 4 couples. If it had 4, I'd hesitate to break that into 2 groups of 8, because there's an awful lot of promenading you have to do and what have you. But it works with any even number of couples with lines of 4. If you can't do pass through 3x3 wheel and deal when you got 4x4 or half by half wheel and deal. But if you stick to the basic modules that we know, it doesn't matter how many you have in your lines. I'm not sure that answered your question though, John.
well, this kind of looks like a flat line Sicilian circle then, right?
The principle's very similar to it.
It could be.
Yeah. Essentially, with the Sicilian circle, what you're working at is isolated site. You can do all the principles that Dawn is saying. For instance, you could do a spin chain through from a Sicilian circle. You could have the ends circulate, but you're essentially working 2 couple organizations. And most of the 2 couple stuff works exactly the way Dawn was saying it. A lot of it is 2 couple dancing. A lot of it is your isolated site modules. It's a great, great teaching tool. I use it an awful lot when I was calling.
I don't use Sicilian circles. Not that I have anything against them. I don't feel I need them. And also I like to get people feeling that square dancing is with squares right away or pretty darn quickly. But that's just, so I hadn't really extended it or thought about it that way, but I can see where Sicilian circles, except we're flatlining. There's something wrong with that, John.
Yeah. The expression flatlining may have it, but the principle of what he's saying is absolutely correct.
And again, hopefully some of the modules in the handout are ones that you already know, and it just reminds you that, oh, this is something that works with that. I haven't done too much specifically with modules as far as teaching them, because so many other people do. But anyway, any other thoughts, comments?
Is there any special consideration when teaching a class and you only have, the 6 couples, and also teaching classes at higher levels, like plus and advanced?
Well, as far as a beginner class, I don't think I've ever used it for that, but gee, it would be a great way to keep, and maybe I have, just to certain calls really lend themselves nicely to it. And it would be a way of getting everybody in to learn this. I mean, from parallel waves, whether you have 2 waves or 3 waves, doing a scoot back and teaching them to go across works great. Doing all 8 circulates works great. Doing a split circulate causes problems. But if you're in parallel waves and do a single hinge, and the typical scoot back or split circulate is a 4 couple thing there, that works fine. Good question, Mike. I guess in your place, if you keep to the ground rules we've talked about, and you can keep to minimum, whatever number of calls that your class knows, it would keep everybody going, and it probably would be a good thing. As far as teaching plus and advanced, there are certain, well, we showed a number of plus calls that work with this. You can do parallel diamonds, 3 parallel diamonds instead of 2. It all works out. And I have a few modules in there that use coordinates. They're kind of cool because this huge column of, when you do coordinate, assuming you start with normal couples before the touch a quarter, I think it's been a while, but I think you do, circulate 1.5, all the boys trade instead of not just everybody, or 3-pair trade would be 5-pair trade. You'd better work that out with your dolls. I don't really remember at this point. That's pretty bad, but it does work out pretty nicely. And I'm assuming there's some A1 calls that you can use with these too. And I'm sure it would even make your dancers more formation aware, more formation awareness because of having to keep track of where they are in the whole thing. So it'd be a good thing. Was that what you were asking, Mike?
Yeah, I didn't know what the answer was going to be, or I thought about applying it to classes if there was any special considerations.
Yeah, don't use calls they don't know. and hopefully think beforehand of the ones you're teaching. It might be a good thing to do that, so it extends their thoughts on just what the call really does and their part within the whole thing. Did I see another hand waving or something? Clark, what have you got to tell me?
A couple things. The first was you were trying to be funny and talked about an 8-chain 15. And that actually would have been an 8-chain 13.
It would have been a 12-chain, but.
Or 12-chain 13, not 12-chain 15. Well, first overriding comment is I remember when I was first exposed to rectangles when you did it. And I don't remember what year that was or where I was, but I remember being immensely amazed and fascinated, and immediately went home and wondered, what other calls work and don't work and why. And I'm not so much interested in the 4-dancer calls because they're pretty obvious. You have 3 groups of 4 and they just do it. But it's the 8-dancer calls that turn into 12-dancer calls, like circulate, spin chain through, spin chain the gears, etc. And I think there's a lot to be learned there. Not necessarily that you have to expose the dancers to it, but just as a caller, you've learned a certain set of calls, a certain set of rules, a certain way of thinking about these calls. And especially as a caller, you're also worried about how's it change the genders around, how is it useful in resolving, and to suddenly have that view, and you've had that view for maybe 2 or 3 years or 5 years or 10 years, and then to suddenly have that system be exploded into a bigger vision, it's like, wow, how can I relate the rectangles to what I already know, etc. And I have a lot to say, but let me just say a few things here and then shut up for a bit.
Let me interrupt one thing, Clark, is I think you came in a little late, but we talked about.
I did.
I talked about 6 couple could be rectangles or facing lines or hexagons, and I think hashtags falls into that, but I didn't understand it. And I'm commented that most people do rectangles, 2 sets of head couples in one side, and I generally do facing lines of 6 as a start. So, but everything.
Yeah, I don't, to me, whether it's facing lines of 6 or the 2 heads and 4 sides or whatever, it's all the same stuff.
It works the same. It's just easier to set up my way, but go ahead.
So, I mean, one question right off the bat to ponder, and we don't need an answer today, but I think it's worth thinking about, is when Color Lab speaks of phaser, formation, arrangement, sequence, and relationship, let's just talk formation. And we talk about, for ocean waves, there's 6 different right-hand ocean waves. There's 6 different ways to stick guys and girls in that and still be symmetric. Well, how many are there in 6-couple dancing? And that gets back to what Don said about sight calling 6-couple dancing and how it's a lot harder. And that's because you can get into different things that never appear in 4-couple dancing. So that's interesting to ponder.
Let me just, you said the different arrangements within parallel waves, but if you've got one wave that's happens to be 2 guys, 2 gals, or 2 guys on the end and gals in the middle, the other wave is the same arrangement. Whereas when you've got 3 parallel waves, just call relay the deucey once and you'll see that the very end waves are symmetric, but the very center one isn't necessarily the same. Symmetry still applies, but that center wave can do its own kind of thing, which is basically what you're saying.
Right, or to really easily see it, split circulate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Assuming, right. Now, the other thing is, when we think of parallel waves of 4, right, we have 8 dancers and we have our 2 waves, and we want to expand that, there's kind of 2 directions you can expand it in. You can either go to 3 parallel waves of 4 or 2 parallel waves of 6. And it's the 8 dancer calls that to me are the most fascinating, because either way we expand those waves we're talking about, everyone's happy with all 8 circulate or all 12 circulate. You either have lots of walking forward if you have the 3 parallel waves, or you have 3 tracks, the inner track, the outer track, and the newly created middle track, if you're talking about waves of 6. By the same token, what can you do with a quarter tag? Well, there's 2 types of quarter tags. You could imagine a quarter tag with 2 waves of 4 in the middle and the couple on the outside. Or you can imagine a quarter tag with a wave of 6 across the middle and couples of 3 on the outside. And if you think about ping pong circulate the same way the creator does, then you would have 3 circulate paths in that wave of 6 across the middle, and you could do a ping pong circulate from there, and it would fit all of his ways of thinking. And yet probably the other quarter tag where you have, 2 waves of 4 in the middle and a couple on the outside. Also, while it adds a brand new spot or position, it's a position that's logical and makes sense, and ping pong circulate is fine from there. And that's partly because ping pong circulates related to circulate, and circulates work expanded in both directions. But certain other calls don't. And it's interesting to think of what does and what doesn't. Certain calls, like chain reaction, actually invent brand new parts that probably no one's ever thought of or seen, but most would go along with, and you can do it. And then there's other calls like spin chain and exchange the gears that from parallel waves of 6 just don't work. And no matter how you try to shoehorn it in. And then wondering in advance, how do I predict which calls work and which calls don't. I mean, even another one at mainstream, the 8-chain through. What if we had the other type of 8-chain, not 3 groups of 4 couples, but 2 groups of 6 couples, lines of 3 facing, right? And you could imagine an 8-chain there where the courtesy turn on the end is an exaggerated 3 dancer as a unit wheeling around courtesy turn. So in any event, those are just some ideas and some thinking. I thought it was fascinating and I enjoyed it for a while. But the fact that some calls work and some calls don't, et cetera, kind of got me like, I wasn't as thrilled once I knew about that. So anyhow, that's some comments for right now.
I tried, I can't remember, and I didn't push the dolls through before. I do have a set of 6 couple dolls. Whether load the boat works or not, I can't quite remember that from facing lines of 6. Work it out, figure it out. But if so, it would be the equivalent of a slide through, assuming normal couples. Clark, you're making us think a lot about this, but you're drifting from my thoughts that anybody can use it if you use the same old basic stuff. And if you really want to get into the complicated stuff, you're overdoing it. Unless you have your own workshop group, and it's fun to call some of these things and see where the heck all this goes. But
well, I did write a note early on in the talk that said this was a good way to feed us modules. Get us interested in 6 couple and then show that all that module calling that you're supposed to know and learn about is really useful.
Love it. Love it. Sorry that Daryl Clendenin's not with us here, because he has been pushing modules for quite a while, and several others. And this would be a good chance for them to expound on that. Any other thoughts, comments, corrections? Have any of you done this kind of stuff before?
So I was just going to toss in that I think my mental run through of Load the Boat says Load the Boat should work, but I would have to, with the group that I have most often workshop Load the Boat, because they're older and aren't great at this, I would have to be very careful about who the centers were and what face in after the pass-through meant. And yeah, I'm always looking for variations for when I'm teaching and I end up on those nights with the odd number of dancers. So, if I can do hex in a square, or a rectangle in a square or something like that, that's great. But this gives me a different way to wrap my head around that. And I appreciate that.
I have a feeling that Unload the Boat, I've got to push the dolls through later, but that when you pass through, the centers pass through and quarter out, the very centers may have troubles figuring out which out is. I don't know.
So you've got 12 dancers, right? So each side has 6, and you're taking 2 off either end. So you have 4 in the middle. So I think that you've basically got 2 couples each doing the center part of Load the Boat. 4 couples each doing center part.
That's the easiest. That's the only way I've ever seen it done is if you load the boat, you do the centers, do your part, and they do it as facing couples, as if they were all facing center couples.
And some people have to figure out whether it's quarter out or face out. Like the second people in, the people on the never mind.
As long as the very centers don't get confused and start working together.
Yeah.
Call it and see what happens, and make corrections next time.
It works with the outsides doing a Load the Boat, and the centers, like you've got your center 8 doing a tag the line and face in, and then the same 8 doing a slide through. That actually works as well.
Anyone else worked with this before? Anyone else thinking, oh, good, I can try and work with this now?
We've also played with Relay the Doocy with this, but you just go 3 sets instead of the 2 sets. You just got to prompt them through it, but it does work.
Well, you can get them to go through the move, but you can't get out with normal modules because your center wave has a different arrangement than the end.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. You just do the relay the deucey, but instead of swing through, get on, get off, you just go an extra time around, and that'll bring you back to the zero arrangement. But it's a very long relay the deucey.
I have a question on resolving using the site resolve method. You have to keep track of 3 couples?
Never done it, Mike, so I don't know, but yeah, that would make sense.
Let me say one other thing on resolving. Not that I'm in it by any means a good resolver of anything, but normally I tried to write a bunch of this stuff for challenge dancing once I first was exposed to it. And I'm pushing checkers through and having to sit at the table and stare at them and resolve. And typically what I ended up doing is moving one couple to the outside and then doing normal 8 dancer square dancing in the middle and getting them to, in the center 8, a trade by position such that the entire group is ready for an Alaman left, for example. And you could imagine sight calling that, but it's a little boring for the couple on the outside that's standing there waiting unless you can do it pretty quickly. And then the next thing to say about sight calling is, and this will encourage you not to do it, is when you're doing normal square dancing, you're promenading, everyone's got their partner, you're pretty happy. And what are your 2 alternatives? They're either in sequence or out of sequence. But with 6 couple dancing, they can be so-called totally in sequence. That's what you want. They can be totally out of sequence. And there's actually 2 other sequences you can be in that are neither of those 2. So getting them in sequence or out of sequence, there's way more ways to be wrong than right, even though you finally got everyone to their partner. So that's another reason to not sight call it.
And from the promenade, you're not going to do heads wheel around or sides wheel around, because who are the heads or who are the sides, or yeah, exactly. I do remember, Clark, that I have tried sight calling and would match 2 couples up on the outside and then play with the 4 in the middle. And you're right, they stood there for a long time.
There are 2 clubs that I call for several times a year, not in the immediate area, that request that I do a rectangle square each time that I'm there. And we usually do it as the last dance of the night. And as somebody had asked a question about, like how many people can you have in the line? Well, if you're doing a rectangle, you end up with lines most of the time anyway. So it's kind of the same sort of thing. But you can have 6 couples, 8 couples, 12 couples, whatever in the rectangle. It doesn't make any difference. The only thing you want to do is you want to keep everybody in sequence. You at some point do an Alaman left and you do a right and left grand, swing somebody and you promenade. And if everybody knows, you tell them, like somebody stop at the side spot. They do. Everybody else becomes heads wherever they happen to be. And then you just pick it up and you go again, and just make sure that all of the time you keep everybody in sequence. At the very end, you make ocean waves. You like say from in sequence lines, do a right and left through, then pass the ocean. Everybody circulate till you find your original partner, swing, and then we do a big promenade around the hall.
Eric, when you say promenade till somebody's in the side position, are you asking them one of the original sides?
No,
or
anybody. Somebody's, because you're getting a feel on the music as to where you are, and just like somebody stop in a side position.
That works.
Just a couple of beats to do that.
Eric, now I know you're quite fluent in mental image calling. Do you use mental image with your 6 couple stuff?
Yes, absolutely.
Good. And I as I said before, I love that the rules you learn for 4 couple extend to 6 couple beautifully.
Most of it, though, you're basically just sort of staying with a 4 couple mental image arrangement. because I'm not worried about getting back to the corner. All right, so like if you have boys circulate or girls circulate or whatever, all I'm trying to do is make sure that I keep sequence.
Anyone else all excited to go out and try this now? Boy, we managed to have a talk that I explained so much perfectly. There's no conversations and questions.
And you pretty much nailed an hour.
Yeah. Mark, save me here.
Yeah. So, this is, you guys touched on this close. I wanted to say a few more words on it because this is something I've done several times. I like to have at a certain square dance weekend, some sessions where we do different dancing, gimmicky dancing for an hour or two. And I'm always having to come up with different gimmicks. And at one point I came up with the gimmick that I called Circle of Squares. So assuming that you have enough dancers, I have them square up, but I want their squares arranged around the room in a circle. And you need a big enough room, not, a rectangular room, but a nice big square room. And maybe we got lucky. I mean, this might be a weekend with 8 squares or 12 squares, and not everyone gets up early in the morning to do the shenanigans. So, maybe you have 6 squares. And I do a little bit of dancing, and when you have a circle of squares, you have to say the heads are the ones facing into the middle of the square with their backs to the square. And at some point you have the heads past the ocean, extend the tag. And what do you have there? Well, each square has parallel ocean waves, but if the squares kind of blend together, you essentially have a Sicilian circle of ocean waves. Sound good?
Sounds
Okay.
like a combination of progressive squares and Sicilian circle.
Right. So at some point, you call in all 8 circulate and just have them go to the next square. And you have to maybe distinguish, are we doing these 8 dancer calls in the square or do we move to the next square? But pretty quickly, I want to move to interesting 8 dancer calls that have you work with the next square and progress to the next square. So at that point, you do some scoot backs, some circulates, and then you work up to spin chain through and have them move on to the next one. You maybe do a couple of those, and then you do a spin chain the gears, and all that works. And one of the things that's important to rely on in this is, even though we say that almost none of these calls are gender dependent, I want to set them up and use their instincts for what normal part of the call they get to have them be more successful. And that harkens back to your load the boat example. Which way do the centers turn and how do they dance it correctly? If they dance it by instinct, they will turn in the proper direction and work with the proper people, even though that's only because we've gotten them into that rut. But let's use the rut to aid in the success rate in that case. So back to my Sicilian circle, or I think of it as circle of squares or spokes of a wheel. There's a couple of calls that are actually pretty funny. And I like to expose them to those. And one of them is Relay the Deucey. So here you have all these nice ocean waves with boys on the ends, girls in the middle. They're all right-handed. And we're going to, and I talk about the buddy system, because in Relay the Deucey, you've got your dancer you start with, you're going to end with that dancer. So let's watch them. Ready? Relay the Deucey. You turn half. The boys are going 3/4. The girls start walking. The boys go 6 by the right. No one gets on, no one gets off, because it's an infinite ocean wave. And then you trade by the right and you keep walking, and then you go left 3/4, and boom, you've got your buddy. And then everyone wants the other part. So you do another Relay the Deucey. So, and Coordinate has some of the same stuff. So you can't go as far with this. And it's the 8 dancer calls that are interesting. And you've got to figure out which ones work and which ones don't. But it's basically your 6-couple dancing stretched into an infinite thing. And so you can certainly get 10 or 15 minutes tip out of that, make them be intrigued, and then leave them wanting more.
In your setup, do a relay the deucey, but interrupt after 3 hands with an Alamo swing through. Anyway, Keith, you had your hand up a while back. You still want to throw in your 3 cents worth?
Well, I don't know. There's a lot of noise going on here today. It was quiet for a minute. But I've seen 2-couple square dancing, and probably you could use this instead at the beginning of every session. When people are arriving and you don't necessarily have full squares and things are kind of disorganized, you can get more people added to the floor as you go along. Bill Davis did that every dance he ever called, every club dance he ever called. And I thought it was a great idea.
That reminds me that something someone taught me years ago, and I was thinking of at the very beginning of this presentation when I did something I shouldn't have done. It was against what the person said. It has not much with choreography, but showmanship and public relations. But if you're expecting 5 squares at your dance and only two are there at 8 o'clock, don't say, well, let's hang around for a few more minutes till we get our, more people come, so we can get started with our full group. The better thing to do is to say, hey, let's get started early. We'll give you something a little special here until maybe people will join us, and make those people special rather than hanging around and paying for the fact that the others weren't there. And I did that very thing at the beginning here because I wanted to start from the beginning and have everybody with it. And I could hear that whoever told me about it bawling me out. But that sounds like what you were saying, Keith, is get started early. And Bill Davis would have, start on time and work with what you got and make them feel special with a 2-couple if you have to. And then, yeah, you could easily make it 4-couple and then make it 6-couple as people joined in. Any other words of wisdom?
Well, if it's a live dance like that and you're having the funny number of people showing up, instead of putting them into a square with a strange number of couples, separate them out so that there's only 1 couple, and then have them slide far apart from each other, and then tell them we're all going to be doing Zoom square dancing.
Zoom square dancing? Oh, I was thinking of the call, not the.
And they would actually understand that now.
I was thinking lowercase z instead of uppercase. Interesting, yes.
We finally got live people. All right, everybody get away from everybody.
Gentlemen, I'm hearing a very loud silence, and we had done our hour. Anne has made the handouts available, which will make very redundant most of what I've just said. Although I think I forgot the singing call part in there. I have a question. If you guys were doing this and doing a singing call, what's your preference? Putting the break at the beginning, in the middle, at the end? Anybody got any thoughts on that? I was never sure which goes over best with the dancers.
I do it just as a normal singing call, and then I truncate the center break, and I just make it do a 6-hand instead of a 4-hand. The normal progression is the normal progression. So I'll truncate. You do an Allemande left, do side do, Allemande left, weave the ring. You just go an Allemande left, weave the ring, and let them do the 6 hands because there's enough time in there to fill that out.
6 hands on a weave the ring. We usually do 0 hands on a weave the. Sorry, Mel. You're talking right and left, Grant. No, I guess what I'm saying is that what I said before, I do 6 figures so everybody gets back to their original partner, and 1 break because there's 7 times through the music.
Yeah.
And the question is, do I do that break at the beginning, in the very center, or at the end? I think I generally do it at the beginning, but sometimes I'm tempted in the very center.
You mentioned handouts, plural. I only got one handout, although it was posted twice, but it was the same handout.
I got both.
No, if you read carefully, they are separate. I believe they are separate. Well, they were
Yeah,
sent to
I
me as
got
separate
both.
files. Are they both the same file?
It reads the same file.
No, I got two different ones.
And now I'm gonna have to try this.
I got 6 couple dancing and a readme for 6 couple handouts.
Yeah, and I'm getting different files here. The first one is 6 couple dancing summary of techniques. The second one is a word about 6 couple handout. So I got them differently. Well, I mean, I put them up, but reading them from that link, I'm getting them differently.
Yeah, the only difference that I do with what you're doing, Don, is instead of working in a line, I actually work as the rectangle. So with the two sets, you know, and that just gives you a little bit more. But the essence of it is, I mean, if you do a head square through, you're in a corner box. If you do a sides lead to the right and circle to a line, you're in a partner line. So really, the essence of it is exactly the same.
I said, Mel, that I believe most people do that.
Yeah.
And there are 2 reasons that I do it starting in lines, and I'm just going to repeat those. One is because that was the first way I figured out how to do it, and I didn't know about the other method. But what I like is that I can also do, if I've got a number of 6 couple squares and only a 4 couple square in the back, well, I guess the rectangle would work with a square too. But if I've got 2 4 couple squares in the back, they can join up as lines of 8, and it works equally well with any of them. And it's easier for me to set up. I just say sides lead to lead right and circle to a line. You're there. I don't have to say, now let's set it up with this many here, this many there, and that kind of thing. But yeah, the choreography, the basics, some modules work, some don't, the whole thing. And the conversion modules that I gave you, corner box to partner lines, etc., all work the same too. So that's, as I say, the majority do it that way. I happen to have a preference and be stubborn, but.
Now, I was watching when you were talking that, and if you set up a corner box, if you have the center for couples do a partner trade, do a triple pass through, and then cloverleaf, then you can have the center for when they meet square through 3, and then the center 8's pass through Dixie Grand, and square through 3 trade by Dixie. You're right there at that Alaman level. So that system that you've got opens up a whole world of potential choreography that you can use, you know, for a novelty of one night. It's a fantastic thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of variety, but again, the point I was trying to make is with minimal of what we know now, we can throw in a tip and everybody will get through it, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
You're sticking to basics that, what have you. Yeah, there's a lot you can expand on it, but I just wanted to keep it basic
And
here.
What I find is really nice is your interactive modules that you have, such as your spin chain through, girls circulate, boys trade, boys run, bend the line, corner box to partner lines, your outs, your conversions, your inversion modules. They all work as well, like and all of your foundation models, swing through, boys run, Ferris wheel, centers pass through, also works to give that full interactive feel without having to learn anything new. It's a real nice feel for the dancers.
As Clark mentioned, the Ferris wheel in the center step to a wave, and you've got ping pong circulate with 2 waves in the middle. That kind of stuff works nicely if you're a mental image caller and know that ping pong circulate is a technical 0. If there's an uncanceled X before and a canceled one after, you can throw in modules using that as a 0, and etc. There's a lot you can do, but I just again wanted to scratch the surface so that people didn't get overwhelmed and could just, regular module callers can throw this in. With that, as I was trying to say when I was so rudely interrupted by me, as I frequently do, I'm going to turn it over to Dan to close out or leave it open for discussion or what have you. Thanks, guys, for paying attention. Thanks for coming. Thanks, Dan, for the engineering and all that other stuff. And a special thanks to the presenter. It's all yours, Dan.
Thank you, Don. Yeah, it seems like we've hit kind of a normal lull in the conversation. So maybe we should close this one out early and I can get back to my house projects. Thank you very much, Don, for opening up my thinking about what I'm going to do when eventually we open this thing back up.
When we go from 0 dancers to 2 dancers to 4 couples to...
Yep, I'm having the problem here of saw 2 dancers go into hospice last week. So actually one of them died. And so, you know, we're still having the Zoom calls, but like how many are going to be left when we get back to dancing?
Has anybody over there done surveys to see how many of their dancers are coming back? I mean, we're doing it here just to get a feel for who's left in the zoo. Have you guys done any kind of phone calling?
We have regular Zoom meetings of my primary group, my local group, the primary, secondary, my 2 clubs. We have regular Zoom meetings of 1, and I kind of feel like I'll have at least a square, if not 2 squares, when they actually come back. The other club I've got, I'm regularly talking with the core members of them, but we've had enough people move away that I have no idea what's going to actually happen when that ends.
We're not even sure if we have a core.
Yeah. Well, I'm one of those, new people to the hobby who sees everything wrong and thinks I can fix everything. Which, every activity suffers from. But I have long said that the problem with square dancing is square dancers. And if we get the chance to pull from a new, fresh group of people without so much vested in the core of the existing straight square dancer community, I think we have the opportunity to rebuild the social aspects of square dancing in a way that serves a larger community.
Somebody should probably set up a program, and mostly what the name is. It's not a class. It's a come get your feet wet again. It's a quick refresher for those that danced but are afraid they may have forgotten some of it, and just let them know it's a nice lukewarm pool they can stick their feet in and come back again. A refresher course of some sort aimed at de-rustifying the COVID brain. But
yeah, Vernon Jones actually said something about that the other night. I think he called it CLR, that calcium lime remover, right? But his was come learn, remember.
David, did you say that was Vernon?
Yeah, Vernon did the Daryl's Tuesday night Zoom with us, him and Ray Savell.
Okay.
And the topic was we need to do some dances or refresher sessions, rust busters, whatever. And that's when Vernon came up with the CLR.
Yeah, it's a good thing that we come up with the right name so that people will be drawn in without feeling offended or that it's too easy or scared that it's too hard. But
and Don, you said somebody had passed. One of them wasn't Oz, was it?
Dan?
No, the person who'd passed is actually a dancer in a local straight club. I know Oz is on hospice, but I don't, or is expected to, but I haven't heard confirmation on that. The other dancer is who you might know from the gay square dance community is Richard of Jim and Richard, Jim Blaine. He's a Vietnamese man about my age, but he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer a little over a year ago, and the complications from that have finally caught up, and he's coming home, and yeah, it's kind of final days.
Was there any COVID related cases?
I am not sure what Debbie died from. It was, kind of a rumor mill, and then an announcement from her daughter on Facebook yesterday or whenever it was. So yeah, it's, and like so many of these, there are an awful lot of deaths that aren't attributed to COVID, which are probably actually COVID. So
Yeah.
Who
What
knows?
was Debbie's last name?
Stone. She was I believe, a relatively newer dancer, largely up at Monroe Hall with either the circles and squares or singles and pairs, because I can never tell those two clubs apart, and they both dance at the same place.
We've lost a few, and I know of a few others that have been lost. But it's as you're saying, Dan, there's underlying conditions that are exacerbated by catching COVID, and whether or not it's the COVID or it just drains the system completely, so they can no longer fight with the underlying condition. So it's, they contracted COVID, but whether or not that was the actual cause or it was just a combination of things, it's hard to tell.
They come back from COVID, and then 6 weeks later, there's some issue with blood clots or something like that, which is, how do you describe that one? And who knows?
I've lost 2 dancers, but both were in car accidents, separate car accidents. Nothing to do with COVID.
Wow. But yeah. And then my other club was kind of having trouble holding on anyway, and a few people took early retirement because of the COVID situation and moved off to other parts of the country where they could actually afford to live, because California. And so I have no idea what that club's going to look like when we go back to it. But
speaking of COVID,
we'll see.
I'm anxious to see what the after effects are of my second COVID shot, which is coming up Tuesday. I'm hoping it's as minimal as my wife's has been.
Man, they keep changing it here. I was in the middle of the list, and now I got bumped down to the bottom of the list, then back up to the middle, and now I'm dumped back to the bottom here in Oregon.
It sounds like we should come up with a call called Yo-Yo, or the Bouncing Ball, or the Bouncing David. I'm definitely scheduled for next Tuesday. When I said my wife's were minimal, she was slowed down for a couple of days with achiness, but none of the nausea and totally out of commission that many others have had, which is a real blessing. Oh boy. Cheery thoughts, come on. That's right, I'm out of this. I had Dan take over. I'm just watching for a while.
Near as I can figure out, there's a nice little square dance math problem, and it works for everybody. If you take your age and add 5 years, that's how old you'll be 5 years from now.
Oh, it is pretty tough.
Assuming you don't die from COVID, is that?
But yeah, I mean, back to the larger point, I think that square dancing is just something to hang it. I mean, square dancing is something I absolutely love, and it's a form of dance that's different from that I would not have gotten into any other form of dance, but it's just something to hang a community off of. And so thinking about why weren't the communities that we had previously attracting new dancers? If they weren't, we had a few that were. And what can we do with this reset to build new communities that are more generally attractive? That's big on my ponderings when I'm lying awake late at night looking at the ceiling thinking about flyer design and stuff.
Good. Knowing the fact that you're a good problem solver, I hope you come up with some good suggestions.
We'll see. Okay, well, I've got a awning to put up over a swim spa and a couple of new cabinet doors to install, and who knows what else. So I think I will let you all go to it. I will post this. Mel also added on some thoughts, so there will be 3 associated documents along with the video, and we didn't have a whole lot of conversation. And Clark is suggesting Better Together by Putman, which I will put on my list right now. And I will catch y'all next week, as long as we can come up with something cool to talk about next week.
And just a reminder to everybody, if you're interested in finding out a little bit more about Caller Lab, if you're not a member, I've got Teresa and Bob coming to talk in my session today about what it is and how you can get involved and help and encourage others. And they put themselves out there to be on the firing line. So come on in and join them and ask them some tough questions. I'll see you guys there.
Cool. Bye, y'all.
Bye.